It was 11:30 on a Tuesday night in March 1969 when Miles Davis walked into a diner on West 4th Street in Manhattan. He just finished a recording session and wanted coffee and pie before heading home. He sat in a booth near the back, ordered black coffee and apple pie, and was about to open the newspaper when he heard crying from the booth behind him. A woman's voice, trying to stay quiet. "I'm so sorry, James. I know you wanted to give me a real wedding." A man's voice, breaking. "You deserve a real wedding, Rosa. You deserve everything, and I can't even give you this one thing." The booth backs were thin, and their conversation was impossible to ignore. "The baby's coming in 3 months," Rosa said. "We need to be married before then. My mama would die if we weren't married." "I know. We'll go to the courthouse Friday. It'll be fine." "James, you don't have to pretend. I wanted the wedding too. I wanted the dress and the flowers and our families there. I wanted to walk down an aisle and have it feel special. I'm sorry I can't afford to give you that. It's not your fault. We both knew when I got pregnant that everything would change. The deposit we put down for the venue, we needed that money for the baby. We made the right choice." "I know, but I still feel like I failed you." Miles sat very still, coffee cup halfway to his lips, listening to two people he'd never met break each other's hearts over something as simple as a wedding they couldn't afford. He thought about his own first wedding. He'd been young, broke, trying to make it in New York. The ceremony had been in someone's apartment. No photographer, no flowers, just a few friends and a preacher who'd done it as a favor. It had been fine, but it hadn't been special, and Miles remembered, even decades later, wishing he could have given his bride something more than fine. He paid his check, stood up, and walked over to the booth where Rosa and James were sitting, both of them crying quietly, both trying to be strong for the other. They looked up, startled, when Miles stopped at their table. Rosa's eyes went wide when she recognized him. "Mr. Davis," she whispered. Miles didn't sit down, just stood there looking at them. Rosa, maybe 23, pregnant, wearing a waitress uniform from whatever job she'd just finished. James, maybe 25, in work clothes, hands rough from labor. "When's the wedding supposed to be?" Miles asked. Rosa wiped her eyes. "We cancelled it, Mr. Davis. We can't afford." "I didn't ask if you cancelled it. I asked when it was supposed to be." James looked confused. "This Saturday at 6 p.m., but we really can't afford the venue anymore." And Miles pulled out a small notebook from his jacket pocket and a pen. "What's your full names?" "Rosa Martinez," she said quietly. "And James Williams." Miles wrote it down. "Saturday, 6 p.m., Village Vanguard. Be there, both of you." "The Village Vanguard," James said. "Mr. Davis, we can't afford." "I'm not asking you to afford anything. I'm telling you to show up. Bring your families. Bring whoever you were going to invite to the wedding. Saturday, 6 p.m., Village Vanguard. Your wedding's happening." Rosa started crying again. "Mr. Davis, we can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm telling. Saturday, 6 p.m. Don't be late." Miles put the notebook back in his pocket and walked out of the diner before either of them could say anything else. The next morning, Miles started making calls. First call, Max Gordon, owner of the Village Vanguard. "Max, I need the club, Saturday evening, 6 p.m., for a wedding." Max laughed. "Miles, you getting married again? Not me. 2 kids who can't afford a venue. I'm giving them one. You're throwing a wedding for strangers? You got a problem with that?" "No problem at all. Club's yours, no charge." Second call, Herman Leonard, the photographer who'd shot most of the iconic jazz portraits of the era. Herman, I need you. Saturday. Wedding at the Vanguard. 6 p.m. Miles, I charge $200 for weddings. Not this wedding. These kids got nothing. I'm covering everything else. I need you to cover the photos. Herman was quiet for a moment. I'll be there. Third call, his favorite Italian restaurant on Bleecker Street. I need catering for 50 people. Saturday evening, delivered to the Village Vanguard. Send me the bill. Fourth call, a florist in the village. I need flowers for a wedding. Saturday, Village Vanguard. Roses, lilies, whatever makes it look like a real wedding. Bill me. Fifth call, a boutique, where Miles sometimes bought gifts. I need a wedding dress. Size 6, I think. Simple but nice, and a veil. Bill me. By Thursday, Miles had organized an entire wedding. Venue secured. Photographer booked. Catering arranged. Flowers ordered. Dress purchased. He'd even called his tailor and arranged for James to get a proper suit. The only thing left was the music, and Miles had a plan for that too. Friday night, Miles called his quintet. Saturday evening, 6 p.m., Village, Vanguard. We're playing a wedding. His bassist laughed. You're joking. No joke. 2 hours. All romantic standards. No bebop. No experimental stuff. Just pretty music for a wedding. Miles Davis playing Here Comes the Bride. Miles Davis playing whatever makes a wedding feel special. Saturday at 5 p.m., Miles was at the Village Vanguard watching the transformation. Flowers everywhere. Tables set up with white tablecloths. Catering laid out. The club that usually hosted jazz legends was, for one night, a wedding venue. Herman Leonard was setting up his cameras. Max Gordon was arranging chairs. Miles' quintet was doing a sound check. Miles had even arranged for a friend of his, who was a minister, to officiate. Everything was ready. At 5:45, guests started arriving. Family members, friends dressed in their Sunday best, confused but excited. At 5:55, James arrived, looking nervous in the new suit Miles had arranged. He walked up to Miles, who was at the piano adjusting the microphone. Mr. Davis, I don't know how to thank you. Miles looked up. You show up, you marry the girl, you take care of that baby. That's how you thank me. Why are you doing this? Because I can. Now go stand up there where the minister is. Your bride's about to arrive. At exactly 6 p.m., Rosa walked in. She stood in the doorway, and her hand went to her mouth when she saw what Miles had created. The flowers, the tables, the guests, and there on a rack in the corner, the wedding dress Miles had bought. Miles walked over to her. Dressing room's back there. Dress is your size. You've got 10 minutes to get ready. Then you're walking down that aisle. Rosa was crying so hard she could barely speak. Mr. Davis, this is too much. We can't. You can. You will. Now go get dressed. You're getting married. 10 minutes later, Rosa emerged from the dressing room wearing the simple but elegant white dress, a veil pinned in her dark hair. She looked like every bride who'd ever dreamed of a real wedding. Miles sat down at the piano. The room went quiet, and then, incredibly, Miles Davis began playing Here Comes the Bride on his trumpet. Not the traditional pompous version, a sweet, slow jazz interpretation that made the song sound like a love letter. Rosa walked down the makeshift aisle between the chairs, her father's arm through hers, tears streaming down her face. James stood at the front, crying too, watching the woman he loved walk toward him in a moment he'd thought they could never afford. The ceremony was simple. The minister spoke about love and commitment, and the journey ahead. Rosa and James exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Nothing fancy, just honest promises about staying together and raising their child, and being there when things got hard. Miles played softly throughout, his trumpet providing a quiet soundtrack to their promises. When the minister said, "You may kiss the bride," Miles played a single perfect note that seemed to hang in the air like a blessing. The reception lasted 2 hours. Miles and his quintet played every romantic standard they knew. "The Way You Look Tonight," "What a Wonderful World," "Embraceable You," "My Funny Valentine." The first dance was Rosa and James, swaying slowly while Miles played Unforgettable. And there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Herman Leonard moved through the celebration with his camera, capturing everything: the cake cutting, the toasts, the dancing, the moment Rosa's grandmother kissed James's cheek and called him her grandson, the moment James's father shook Miles's hand and couldn't find words to express his gratitude. Miles never left the piano. For 2 full hours he played wedding music, transforming the village vanguard into a place of romance and celebration. At 8:30, during a break in the music, Rosa walked over to Miles at the piano. "Mr. Davis," she said quietly, "why did you do this? You don't even know us." Miles looked at her. This young woman who'd been crying in a diner booth 48 hours earlier, now glowing in a wedding dress, married, celebrated, given the dignity of a real wedding. "I overheard you Tuesday night," Miles said. "You and your husband trying to be brave about not having the wedding you wanted, trying to pretend it didn't matter." "We would have been okay," Rosa said. "The courthouse would have been fine. Maybe. But you wanted more than fine. You wanted special, and someone should have it. Why not you?" "But we're nobody. We're just—" Miles stopped her. "You're not nobody. You're a young couple starting a family, trying to do things right. That's not nobody. That's everybody." Rosa started crying again. "We'll never forget this. Never." Miles nodded. "Good. Don't forget it. And someday, when you can, do it for someone else. That's how this works." The celebration continued until 10 p.m. Rosa and James left, surrounded by family and friends, both of them transformed by the night. They'd walked in expecting nothing, and they'd been given everything. 3 months later, Rosa gave birth to a boy. They named him Miles. That could have been the end of the story. A beautiful gesture, a magical night, a couple given a wedding they'd never forget. But it wasn't the end. Every year on May 26th, Miles Davis's birthday, Rosa and James sent a card to his house in New York. Every year, without fail. The cards were simple. Just a note. "Thank you for our wedding. Love, Rosa, James, and Miles Jr." Miles never acknowledged the cards, never called or wrote back, but he kept every single one in a drawer in his home office. When Miles died in September 1991, Rosa and James drove from their home in New Jersey to Miles's funeral. They brought their son Miles, now 22 years old, studying music in college. At the funeral, Rosa told Miles's family the story of the wedding. How Miles had overheard them in a diner, how he'd thrown them a wedding in 4 days, how they'd named their son after him. Miles' children had never heard the story. Their father had never mentioned it. After Miles died, Rosa and James continued their tradition, but they changed the destination. Every May 26th, they visited Miles's grave in Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx. They brought flowers, they brought their son, and they stood there telling Miles thank you for the night that changed their lives. They did this for 30 years. Every year, rain or shine. Even when James got sick, even when Rosa needed a walker. In 2021, James died. At his funeral, Rosa told the story again, how Miles Davis had given them a wedding, how that night had set the tone for their entire marriage, how every time things got hard, they remembered that someone they didn't know had cared enough to make their dream come true. That night taught us something, Rosa said at James's funeral. It taught us that kindness doesn't require a reason, that generosity doesn't need to make sense, that you help people not because you know them, but because you can. She was 86 years old when she told that story. James had been gone for months, but she still glowed when she talked about the wedding Miles Davis threw for them in 1969. As for Herman Leonard's photographs, the visual evidence of that impossible night, they stayed locked away for decades. Herman had been at that wedding. He'd captured everything. The flowers, the dress, Rosa walking down the aisle, Miles at the piano, the first dance, the cake cutting, the joy on everyone's faces. But Miles had made Herman promise not to publish the photos while Miles was alive. This isn't for publicity, Miles had told him. This is private. Herman kept that promise. For 26 years after the wedding, and 4 years after Miles died, those photographs stayed in Herman's archives, unseen. It wasn't until 1995, in an interview with Downbeat magazine, that Herman finally revealed the story. Miles swore me to secrecy while he was alive, Herman said. But he's gone now and I think people should know. Miles Davis threw a wedding for 2 strangers because he overheard them crying in a diner, paid for everything, played the whole ceremony, never told anyone. The photos were finally published in the early 2000s. One photo became iconic. Miles at the piano, Rosa in her wedding dress, standing beside him crying, James's hand on her shoulder, all 3 of them caught in a moment of pure, unexpected grace. The caption read, "The wedding Miles Davis threw for strangers, Village Vanguard, March 1969. Today that photograph hangs in the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, in the section about jazz and American culture." The story of Miles, Rosa and James has become legendary in jazz circles. It's told as evidence that Miles Davis wasn't just a musical genius. He was someone who understood that greatness isn't just about how well you play. It's about what you do when you can do something and nobody's watching. Miles Davis never told anyone about that wedding, never used it for publicity, never mentioned it in interviews. He just did it because he heard 2 people crying over something he had the power to fix. Rosa Martinez Williams is 91 years old now. She still visits Miles's grave every May 26th. She still brings flowers, and she still tells the story to anyone who listens. Miles Davis gave us more than a wedding, she says. He gave us dignity. He gave us the feeling that we mattered to someone. That night changed how we saw ourselves. We weren't just poor kids having a courthouse wedding anymore. We were people someone cared about enough to celebrate. If you've ever felt like you didn't matter, like your dreams were too small to be worth anyone's attention, remember Rosa and James. Remember that Miles Davis heard them crying and decided their wedding deserved to be special. Subscribe for more stories about kindness that nobody witnessed, about celebrities who helped people without cameras watching, and about the weddings that changed lives for reasons that had nothing to do with the ceremony and everything to do with the caring. Because sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't what you can afford. It's showing them that they're worth celebrating.